I was curious. I mean, I think transition is such a, we all have transitions, right? We all have crossroads. And you published your NCR column on the Transitus, when Francis is leaving this life and moving on to the next. What did you learn in your own discernment, or you talked about a period of examination? What did you learn about yourself during that time?
I think one thing that I learned actually ties to that feast day that we celebrate in the Franciscan family, which is, as I mentioned just a moment ago, I think certainly in the early months and years of this discernment, and it goes back to the pandemic and even a bit before that, I think I was really struggling to make sense of where I was hearing the Spirit calling me and kind of a resistance to that. I think in large part because I was operating with this assumption that was really quite binary, that was kind of either or, that was this or that. And I think I personally struggled with making sense of, well, how could it be that for so long I have felt God leading me on this path as a friar minor, as a ministerial priest in the Catholic Church, and now this. We talked earlier about switching paths, but at that time it just seemed like it was an either or, that it's like all or nothing. And I think the Feast of the Transitus, right, the spirituality that undergirds that for Francis of Assisi is a kind of pulling the rug out from beneath these assumptions that we have. And he does this most clearly with the kind of most radical either or, life and death, you know? And so people think of death as the end, as an absolute, as the opposite, or as the negation of life. And yet, he embraced his sister bodily death, right? This ultimate either or, in a spirit of transition, calling it a transitus, as a passage, as a transition, as a development, indeed a change, right? Life is changed. It is no longer the same. It is different, but it is not antithetical to what came before. It is not a negation of that or an elimination of it. In some ways, it might be a building upon it, right? If we think about God calling us into the communion of saints, it's a deepening of relationship across time and space that we don't always get to share in the same way in our earthly lives. And so, coincidentally, I should say this too, that it wasn't even my, like, oh, you know what? October 3rd, this is when I want this column to come out. Coincidentally, it was my regularly scheduled publication date. And so, part of the discernment, once it became clear to me after many years and then months of reflection and prayer and counseling and spiritual direction and consultation, it was becoming clear that this is where I was being led, and this is where the transitus, the transition was going. I happened to the question then became, well, how are we going to convey this? How would I share this information? And it was at that point a few, I would say little less than 2 months out, and seeing that, oh my gosh, I have a column that will be published on this day anyway. And so I went to, after that was clear that that was just like theologically and spiritually just too good to be true. I talked with a number of folks, including the publisher and executive editor at NCR, and said, "Hey, I just want to let you know this is what I'm thinking about. I also, if this isn't the right venue for that, let me know." But they were very, very supportive and really appreciated the kind of trust to use this, what I would call like media real estate, right? As a columnist, I get this chunk of space in both virtual space, but also on a print newspaper twice a month. And so I felt really honored that they were so encouraging and supportive. And the folks who have reached out to me since that publication have been just overwhelmingly the same. Like I've heard a couple naysayers, but most people, I mean, I'm talking about hundreds and thousands of messages, not hundreds of thousands, but hundreds and thousands, depending on the means of communication, have been really really encouraging, really supportive, really prayerfully engaged with what I've shared and sharing their own experiences, which has been really a blessing as well.